Welcome back to Humble Recaps. Today's movie is Taken. I mean, the name of it is Taken. There are some spoilers ahead. Let's get started without any further ado. Brian is a divorced ex-CIA agent with a cautious demeanor who has given up his job to be near his 17-year-old daughter Kim and lives alone in an apartment in her hometown of Los Angeles. Kim grew up with a passion for singing and horseback riding, and she is currently living with her mom, Lenore, and her wealthy stepdad, Stuart. Brian is obsessed with Kim and doesn't want to lose her like he did his marriage, so he does everything in his power to spend more time with her and keep her happy. In this regard, he gets her a karaoke machine as a present and brings it to her lavish birthday party at her stepfather's mansion. He immediately confronts Lenore, who treats him coldly and lays down some ground rules, such as that he should not personally give the gift to his daughter or take pictures. But Brian breaks these rules one by one, putting his daughter's happiness first. Seeing the present, Kim is overjoyed unlike her mother, and tells Brian that she still wishes to be a singer. But Brian's good times don't last long, and Kim notices Stuart's gift, which sends her over the moon, and makes his dad a loser in the how much happy can you make Kim competition with a sad karaoke machine next to him. Later that evening, Brian gathers with his former co-workers for grilled steak and beer. One of them named Sam, who finds Brian sad and unemployed, offers him an easy job, $2,500 for a few hours, and the chance to personally meet a female pop star, which he agrees to without hesitation. Brian and his ex-co-workers get the chance to come together as a team again, however not as a secret agent on an overseas mission, but with a major breakthrough to escort some girl to her concert. Sam runs the operation, and Brian is the girl's personal bodyguard. Considering his daughter's passion for singing, he asks the pop diva for advice. But the arrogant girl suddenly gets witty and responds, "Tell her to pick another career." After the performance, the crowd manage to get inside by breaching the security. Brian takes the girl away from the fans, until he is confronted by a knife-wielding attacker. He expertly takes him down in an instant and gets the singer out of there in no time. Then he tries to comfort her by giving her a shoulder to cry on, which causes things to get changed between them. As a thank you for saving her life, the girl decides to fulfill his daughter's dream by providing her with a voice coach and manager, as well as covering all expenses. The next day Brian meets Kim and her mother in a coffee house. Just as he's about to play his trump card and tell them about the pop star, Kim excitedly informs him that she is going to Paris with a friend, and that she needs his permission. In response, he offers to come along so that he can look after them. Since traveling with dad is not what a teenager wishes for, and Brian doesn't seem comfortable sending his daughter to such a faraway place, the negotiation fails, and Kim leaves the table disappointed. Following her, Lenore scolds Brian for being overly cautious, and then she joins her daughter. Brian, who is now on the verge of losing his daughter, decides to agree under 3 conditions: knowing where she will stay, who she will meet, and having constant phone contact with her. When Kim hears this, she literally jumps for joy and accepts the terms right away. In the airport, Brian finds a map and a catalog in Kim's backpack, revealing that Paris isn't her only destination. When he shows them to Lenore, he realizes that he has been duped. In fact, Kim has tickets for a rock band's tour, and plans to follow them around Europe. Brian loses his cool when he hears this, but it doesn't take long for him to be guilt-tripped by Lenore, recalling his long-term loneliness when Brian was working for the government overseas. She also warns him that limiting Kim will cause him to lose her. So Brian decides to pretend he knows nothing and happily sends her off. Kim and her 19-year-old friend Amanda are in Paris waiting in a taxi line, when they come across a charming young guy named Peter. After taking some photos of them, he suggests that since the taxi is very expensive, they can share one. Amanda readily agrees, and even later when he invites them to a party, unlike Kim who doesn't seem interested, she's unable to say no to that. Knowing their precise location, Peter reports it on the phone after they separate and leaves. When they get upstairs, Amanda informs her friend that she's going to sleep with Peter, and since Kim is virgin, she sees this romantic nation as the best place to start her adventure. She then puts on some music and starts dancing around, while Kim goes to the bathroom, and misses her father's call. On the other side of the planet, Brian calls Lenore, and wakes her up to express his concern. In contrast, she doesn't seem to be worried at all, and tells him to give his daughter some space, and then she hangs up right away. The second time Brian calls his daughter, she answers, but since the music is too loud, she goes back to the bathroom, where she can see Amanda. Meanwhile, Kim notices some invaders in the house who are kidnapping Amanda. So she bursts into tears and informs Brian of the situation. He's shocked at first, but quickly pulls himself together, activates his call recorder device, and begins guiding his daughter. He begins by asking Kim if they have seen anyone along the way, to which she responds by pointing to Peter. Then he guides her to the next room and instructs him to hide under the bed. While revealing to Kim that she will be taken, he asks Kim to shout out any specific details about them before they take her away. When the kidnappers enter the room, Brian overhears their conversation, and makes sure that they are not French. After a short while, they leave the room, and Kim feels a little better, but soon she is dragged out from under the bed, by one of them who stayed in. Terrified, she starts screaming the kidnapper's physical characteristics. Beard, 6 feet, tattooed right hand, moon and stars. Following this, Brian detects the kidnapper's breathing on the phone and informs him of his special abilities.
If you're looking for ransom, I can tell you I don't have money, but what I do have are a very particular set of skills that make me a nightmare for people like you.
He also threatens to go after them and kill them if his daughter is not released immediately. But the latter is not frightened by these threats and wishes him good luck. Brian immediately sends the recorded call to Sam and asks him to analyze it. He then goes straight to Lenore to discuss the situation, and also asks Stuart to get him a private jet to Paris as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Sam calls back and gives him the information he got. He says that the man Brian spoke to is Marco, the head of an Albanian mafia that specializes in trafficking and selling women. Additionally, he points out that at the best, their preys turn into drug addicts and prostitutes, and that he only has 96 hours before his daughter completely disappears. When Lenore hears this, she bursts into tears and begs Brian to just return her daughter. On his way to Paris, Brian goes over the 2 words he heard from Marco over and over again. When he arrives, he goes straight to Kim's apartment and sneaks in to look for a clue. As he searches further, he discovers the memory card from her broken phone, and while exploring it, notices Peter's reflection in the photo that he took earlier. Therefore, he tracks him down at the airport while he's setting up a trap for another girl. Brian throws him into a cab and begins punching him in the ribs, asking for Kim's location. But he's suddenly pulled out of the car by Peter's partner. Brian gets rid of him by kicking him in the crotch, striking him in the neck, and slamming his face into the car, but this gives Peter a chance to flee. He starts chasing Peter right away, but unfortunately his only living clue is run over by a truck and dies. With no other choice, he asks for help from an old friend named Jean-Claude, who is now a security official at the Ministry of Interior. While showing Brian where he can find the Mafia, he asks him not to sabotage. Brian responds that he'll destroy the Eiffel Tower if he has to, and then leaves the place, while his friend hires an agent to look after him. Brian rents a car and goes to the said location with an Albanian English translator, while these movements are reported to Jean-Claude. The place is crowded with prostitutes. He approaches one and tries not to let her match with any customers, and he continues until Mr. Pimperson shows up to get some money, as compensation for the lost customers. Brian acts gullible and pays the money, but only after placing a bugging device on his jacket. In his car, the translator begins explaining the conversation between Mr. Pimperson and his sidekick. As it turns out, they are going to a construction site to handle a business, so Brian dismisses the translator and goes after them. The Albanian Mafia has set up a trailer there, with several holes separated by curtains, each containing a prostitute and a customer. Brian begins to draw back the curtains in search of Kim, only to be confronted by the agonizing sight of young girls, with multiple needle marks on their hands. He notices Kim's jacket in one of the holes and goes inside, thinking he has found his daughter, but instead finds a girl who's high like an astronaut.
I'm good.
He decides to take the girl with him, but he faces several bouncers. However, he manages to defeat them one by one, using his phenomenal skills and deadly blows. Under the heavy fire of the Albanians, he loads the unconscious girl into an SUV and drives away. Although they chase Brian bumper to bumper and use every opportunity to shoot him, they all come to a stop somehow, and Mr. Pimperson in particular, has a terrible accident with an excavator, leaving us with 2 pieces of him. Brian takes the unconscious girl to a hotel and provides her with Narcan medicine to detoxify her body. When she regains consciousness, Brian asks her about Kim. Seeing her picture, she recalls Kim and says that they were in the same house for a while. She also remembers the night of her kidnapping and provides Brian with the address and specifics about the house. Paradise Street, a house with the red door. After receiving constant reports about Brian, Jean-Claude sets up a date with him. He goes to the place but doesn't show himself. Jean-Claude says that he's aware about all the damage he has caused in Paris and wants him to leave this country today, while the latter refuses to leave until he has his daughter back. Meanwhile, Jean-Claude's men locate Brian's phone and head to arrest him, but they soon realize they've been tricked by Brian, and he isn't actually there. Brian then goes to the house with the red door, which is the location of the Albanians, and uses Jean-Claude's car to meet with their boss as a government bribe taker. He walks confidently into their filthy meeting room, and notices the moon and star tattoo that Kim mentioned earlier. He then explains that the rate of bribes has increased, and that he's here for more. They initially refuse, but when they realize that all of their evil deeds are as clear as glass to Brian, they agree to pay the money. He then hands a piece of paper with the words "good luck" written in Albanian on it, to Marco's closest match, and asks him to translate it. By doing this, Brian recognizes Marco's voice, and reveals his real identity. Marco tries to attack him right away, but Brian knocks him out in a split second. He then stabs one of them in the chest and uses the corpse as a shield to kill the others. When other Albanians hear gunshots, they rush into the room, so Brian blends in with the corpses, to easily kill everyone who walks in without being seen. He then goes upstairs, where he finds several young girls drugged and handcuffed to their beds. Among them he finds drug-overdosed body of Amanda, but no sign of Kim. Therefore, he drags Marco down to the basement to interrogate him about her whereabouts. After torturing him by sticking 2 rods in his thighs, and electrocuting the living daylights out of him, he finds out that they sold Kim to someone named St. Clair because of her virginity. So he punishes Marco by flipping the switch and leaving his body being electrified for eternity. Then we see Jean-Claude returning home, and he is surprised to see Brian there. So he goes to the bathroom, pulls out a pistol he had hidden under the sink, and returns to the dinner table. Brian accuses him of collaborating with the Albanians, which turns out to be true. But before he can do anything, the latter pulls the handgun on him, and orders him to return to America immediately. But Brian surprises him by tossing the bullet of his unloaded handgun on the table, and immediately shooting his wife in the arm. By threatening the woman, Brian manages to get St. Clair's information, and then he says thanks to his old friend, by making him unconscious. Putting himself in Jean-Claude's shoes, he attends a party hosted by St. Clair. After knocking out the receptionist and a couple of waiters, he makes his way to the lower floors as one of the staff. On one of the floors, he discovers a hallway full of darkened rooms that encircle a stage, which inside each room is a wealthy customer, who intends to bid on the girl that he sees on the stage. Brian walks into one of the rooms and meets an Arab customer who has just purchased the girl on stage. The announcer introduces the next girl as tonight's best and last item. As you would expect, Brian sees his beloved daughter, drugged and staggering, dressed like prostitutes, and being sold as an item. Even though he's shocked by seeing her this way, he pulls a gun on the customer, and forces him to buy her for $500,000. But when they are leaving the room, Brian is knocked out from behind. He wakes up surrounded by St. Clair and his men, handcuffed and hanging from a pipe. He begs St. Clair to return his daughter and even offers to pay for her. But the latter responds that this is a no-return business, so he instructs his men to quietly kill him and walks away. One of the henchmen tries to strangle him with a belt. While Brian is struggling to breathe, he frees himself by breaking the pipe above him, and begins destroying the guards. He then comes for St. Clair, shoots him 3 times in the arms and legs, and demands to know where Kim is. The latter points to a boat on the quay, while informing Brian that it was not a personal matter. But not only this doesn't save him, but also buys him several shots in the chest. Brian finds the recently sailed away boat at any cost, and jumps on it from the bridge. By taking down the first guard, he clears the way to enter the lower levels of the Arab's boat, and turn on the action once more. He then enters the Arab Sheikh's bedroom, only to find his daughter held hostage with a curved knife on her throat. After concentrating for a second, Brian kills the Sheikh with a single shot to the head, and after several exhausting days, he's finally able to embrace his daughter again. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more contents like this.